Where'd it go?
There's no question that the climate is changing, and scientists will tell you that one of the outcomes of that is more frequent and more severe storms, droughts and floods. They just can't tell you when or where these things will actually occur. The problem that I have when people set up the dynamic of the discussion is they'll say humans caused it or they didn't. The climate in the Earth has been changing since it was established. I mean, we've had ice ages and we weren't around to mess those up. But to assume that human activity isn't exacerbating a natural trend to the point where nature can no longer adapt, and that poses problems for us, I think is very naive. And so it is one of those issues where you have to acknowledge that what we've been putting into the air and what we've been doing in changing land use has had an impact, and we've got to start thinking now about how we mitigate that. I do not believe that the world's going to end tomorrow, or that in 10 years it's too late, we can't do anything, but I do believe we need to start today to think about reasonable ways to address the issues, and I'm absolutely convinced we can do that without trashing our economy.
Now, but you were saying that there is a connection between what's going up into the air and the intensity of the hurricanes that are coming out.
Well, scientists will tell you that there is a definite correlation between these temperature changes that we're seeing and the frequency and severity of storms.
Okay, great. Steve, as you've heard obviously plenty about the EPA under Stephen Johnson. I'd like to get your assessment on where, since your tenure, what's happened to the EPA, what can be done corrected, and basically your recap of what's been happening in the past year or so. Starting the tailpipe emissions, and it starts from there.
You know, Steve's been under a lot of pressure, and the Council for Environmental Quality and the White House have had a lot of influence, you know, as they should, I guess, because it's administration policy, and that's what you should do is stand up and say, this is policy. Not try to change the science to fit the policy, but say, here's the science, but here's the policy, and this is why we're doing the policy this way. And that's the kind of thing you need to do. And in a new administration, I would hope that one of the first things they do is talk about making EPA a cabinet-level position, so that it's recognized we're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have the environment at cabinet level officially. It's treated that way, but not officially. And to recognize that science informs all the decisions that the EPA makes, but there are policy considerations too, and that's legitimate. But you just need to keep the two things separate and be very clear.
Can you tell me about, can you sum up Dick Cheney's influence on the EPA and on the environment in general? How would you sum that up in a few words if you had to choose?
Well, clearly he's had a very great interest in what's happened in the environment and the Environmental Protection Agency, probably more than anybody else in the White House. And certainly I dealt with him on a lot of issues directly, and we weren't always in the same place, but he is the vice president. He was speaking for the president, so but it has fallen to him, and he has had an enormous amount of influence.
Does he have too much influence on environmental policy? Did Bush give him too much influence?
Well, you know, that's where the vice president has influence and where they don't have influence is up to the president. It's a presidential decision, so you can't really say too much or not enough. Whether you agree with it or not is something else again, but he is only acting as much as the president will allow him to act. That's true of any vice president, so this is a presidential decision.
Do you agree with some of the things he's done, like influence on Stephen Johnson?
Well, I mean, Steve will tell you that he's made a lot of these decisions on his own. I know what the pressure was like. I wasn't always happy with it, and I presume that there's some times when Steve isn't happy with it either. And I hope that in the future, going forward, that again, it can be recognized that the science may lead you to think you're going to be one place, but policy may take you somewhere else, and you separate those two things and explain to the American people why your policy may not be where you think it might be because of the science. Because science isn't exact, and scientists disagree, and there are always, as I say, those policy considerations that Congress makes you take into consideration on some issues particularly. So it's one of those things that it's up to the administration. I'm not as comfortable as I would like to be with some of the decisions they've made, but that's their choice to make, and they were the ones that were elected.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Todd Whitman consents to be interviewed.
By the Center for American Progress.
By the Center for American Progress.
Action.
Action.